family is the safest place in the world? That's a lie. My own son turned my home into a prison, and for 12 long years, I lived in silence inside it. I was 68 when I learned what betrayal really meant. By then, my body had already betrayed me once before. A sudden stroke had stolen half of my strength, paralyzing me from the waist down. I thought the worst had already happened, that life had shown me its cruelty and moved on. But no, life had just prepared the stage for something darker. After the hospital discharged me, I came back to the same house where I'd raised 3 children, cooked hundreds of meals, celebrated birthdays and Christmases. Everything looked the same. The brown sofa in the living room, the yellow curtains, the photo frames on the wall. But the lock on the front door was broken, and I didn't have the strength to fix it. I remember staring at that crooked metal thinking, if the lock doesn't protect me anymore, who will? Junior, my youngest, was the one who moved in with me after the stroke. At first, the neighbors thought it was noble of him, that he was stepping up to take care of his mother. They would wave at him from their porches, saying, "That's a good boy you raised." I stayed quiet, even smiled sometimes, because it was easier than explaining the truth. He was 28 then, tall and broad, with a careless laugh that sounded almost boyish. People liked him. They didn't see how his hands tightened when he pushed my wheelchair, how his eyes stayed cold even when his mouth formed a smile. They didn't hear the way he sighed with irritation when I asked for a glass of water or when I called his name because I couldn't reach the window. At first, I tried to excuse it. He was tired. He was stressed. He was sacrificing his youth for me. But excuses are just pretty lies we tell ourselves when the truth is too sharp to swallow. The first weeks after he moved in, I told myself to be grateful. He cooked simple meals, though sometimes he left me hungry until late at night. He gave me my pills, but never with patience, always tossing the bottle onto the table, the tablets rolling like dice. I told myself that it didn't matter. He was here. He was helping. That was enough. But there was a moment, a small one, that pierced my illusions. I asked if I could call my sister. The phone was right there on the counter. He looked at me, really looked at me, then slowly pushed the phone into the drawer and closed it. "You don't need anyone else," he said flatly. "You have me." Something inside me went cold. It was the same chill I had felt staring at the broken lock on the door. I tried to ignore it, but the silence in the house grew heavier each day. He stopped opening the curtains, saying the sun made the room too hot. He unplugged the television, claiming it wasted electricity. My world shrank to 4 walls, a chair by the window, and the sound of his footsteps pacing from room to room. Every time he left the house, he took the keys with him. I would hear the lock click, the metal grinding against itself, and I would realize I was not just his mother. I was his prisoner. One night, I asked him why he locked the door from the outside. His eyes didn't even flicker. "For your safety," he said. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that maybe he was right, that maybe I needed to be protected from strangers, from accidents. But the truth whispered differently. The lock wasn't keeping danger out. It was keeping me in. And that was only the beginning. The first time he raised his voice at me, it wasn't about anything important. I had asked if he could leave the curtains open so I could see the sky. He stopped in the doorway, turned, and stared at me like I had insulted him. "Why are you always complaining?" His voice wasn't loud, but sharp, like glass pressed against skin. I wanted to explain that I just wanted a little light, that I missed the sun on my face, but my words dried up in my throat. He closed the curtains without another word, and I sat there in the dark, listening to the sound of the rod scraping against the hooks. It felt final, like a door closing inside me. Over time, small cruelties piled up like stones on my chest. He would leave me sitting in wet clothes if I spilled water, saying, "You're not a child, figure it out." He would eat meals in front of me, leaving me cold scraps, as if hunger was part of my punishment for existing. He controlled every detail of my day: when I ate, when I bathed, when I could move from the chair to the bed, and when I tried to resist, he had a simple weapon: silence. He would ignore me for hours, even days, until my pleas shriveled into whispers. Once my sister called the house. I heard the phone ringing in the drawer where he had hidden it. I begged him to answer. He looked at me slow and deliberate, then pulled the drawer open, stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, and closed it again. "She doesn't need to hear your nonsense," he said calmly. "You'll only worry her." My chest tightened so much I thought I would break. That's when I realized it wasn't just my body that was paralyzed. My voice was too. Doctors visited sometimes for routine checkups. They asked questions, but never the right ones. "Are you eating well? Is he helping with your medication? Do you feel stable?" Junior would stand in the corner, arms crossed, smiling politely. I would nod, too afraid to tell the truth because his presence pressed against me like a shadow. Once, a nurse lingered longer than usual. She adjusted my blanket, her eyes scanning my arms, my face, the silence in the room. For a second, I thought she saw me, that she knew something was wrong. My lips trembled with words I didn't dare speak. And then Junior placed his hand gently on my shoulder and said, "She gets nervous around strangers." The nurse smiled weakly, noted something on her clipboard, and left. The door clicked shut. His hand tightened on my shoulder until it hurt. "Don't embarrass me," he whispered. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought of the lock again. The broken lock that no longer protected me. Now he was the lock. He decided who entered my world, what I saw, what I heard, even what I thought about myself. The worst part wasn't the pain or the hunger. It was the way I started believing him. When he called me useless, I wondered if he was right. When he said I was a burden, I whispered apologies into the dark. One morning, I tried to push myself out of the chair without his help. I slid halfway to the floor before my body gave out. I lay there on the cold tiles, gasping, humiliated, waiting for him to notice. Hours passed. He stepped over me twice, once to grab his jacket, once to get a beer. He didn't say a word. By the time he finally lifted me back into the chair, my skin was raw, my voice hoarse from calling out. He looked me in the eyes, not with anger, not with pity, but with something worse: indifference. "See what happens when you don't listen?" he said. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call the neighbors, the police, anyone. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. My words had been stolen long before my body was. The night it began, the air felt heavier than usual. The house was silent except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I was dozing in my chair when Junior came in, smelling of alcohol. His steps were uneven, dragging across the floorboards. He stood in front of me, swaying slightly, and stared for a long time without speaking. I tried to ask if he was okay, but my throat closed on the words. Something in his eyes was different, emptier, darker, as if he had left his humanity at the door. He leaned down, close enough for me to feel the heat of his breath, and whispered, "You belong to me now." My stomach clenched. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe he was joking, drunk, out of control. But then his hand gripped the arm of my chair so tightly that the wood groaned. "No one will ever come for you," he said. "No one cares. I'm all you have." What followed is something I still struggle to name. I will not describe the details, They are scars I keep hidden even from myself. But I will say this: that night, something broke inside me. It wasn't just my body, though he used that too. It was the last fragile thread of safety I thought I had. A mother should never fear her child. Yet there I was, paralyzed not only by my stroke but by the weight of my son pressing his power into my silence. The next morning, he behaved as if nothing had happened. He fried eggs, whistled softly, set a plate in front of me. "Eat," he said. My hands trembled so badly that I could barely hold the fork. I wanted to scream at him, to shout for the neighbors, to throw the plate across the room. But instead I ate in silence, chewing around the lump in my throat, tears slipping down my cheeks. He watched me, calm, almost amused. "See? You can live like this. It's easier if you stop fighting." Days blurred into nights and nights into weeks. It became routine. His footsteps in the hallway meant dread. His silence meant punishment. My body became a cage, and my mind tried to float above it, leaving me like a ghost watching from the ceiling. Sometimes I counted the cracks in the paint on the wall just to survive. Sometimes I focused on small sounds, the drip of the faucet, the hum of the refrigerator, to remind myself the world still existed outside his control. I thought about telling someone, anyone, but how? Who would believe me? A paralyzed old woman accusing her only son? Even if they did believe me, what then? Would they take him away? Would they leave me alone, helpless, unable to care for myself? The thought terrified me almost as much as he did. That was his greatest weapon. He made me believe I couldn't survive without him. One afternoon, a neighbor knocked on the door. I heard her voice through the thin walls, cheerful, asking if I wanted company. My heart leapt. I tried to call out, but my voice cracked into nothing. Junior opened the door just a sliver, enough for her to see his face. "She's resting," he said, smiling politely. "Doctor's orders, but thank you." He closed the door gently, as if nothing was wrong. Then he turned to me. His smile vanished. "Don't ever try that again." That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. I thought of the broken lock, of the phone hidden in the drawer, of the curtains closed against the sun. I thought of the eyes of my neighbor, bright with kindness, just inches away, and how quickly the door had shut between us. My world was shrinking, one lock, one silence, one stolen moment at a time. And still, deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Survive." I thought, foolishly, that someone would notice, that the bruises on my arms, the hollowness in my eyes, the way my voice faltered whenever Junior stood behind me, would be enough to raise suspicion. But the world has a strange way of closing its eyes when the truth is too uncomfortable to face. My sister visited once. She hadn't been around in months, claiming she was busy with her grandchildren. When she finally stepped into the house, her perfume filled the stale air like a memory of another life. She hugged me gently, kissed my cheek, and asked, "Are you being taken care of?" My lips parted, the words trembling at the edge of my tongue. I wanted to tell her everything, that I was trapped, that her nephew had turned into a monster, that I needed her to save me. But Junior stood in the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, smiling as though we were the perfect little family. His shadow stretched into the room, and my courage shrank with it. I forced a smile and said, "Yes, he takes good care of me." My sister sighed with relief, patted my hand, and never looked deeper. Doctors were worse. They came with their clipboards, their polite questions, their rehearsed smiles. "How are you feeling? Any improvement? Eating regularly?" I nodded, nodded, while Junior hovered nearby like a watchman. Once, I tried to whisper something to a nurse as she adjusted my blanket. My lips moved, but my voice cracked, and Junior cleared his throat behind her. She froze, glanced at him, then back at me and said, "You're lucky to have such a devoted son." That sentence pierced deeper than any knife. Devoted. That's what they saw. That's what everyone saw. Even the neighbors, who sometimes caught glimpses of me at the window, never asked questions. Perhaps they noticed the curtains always drawn, or the way my smile seemed painted on. Perhaps they told themselves stories. She's old, she's tired, she's sick. People prefer the lie that lets them sleep at night, and so the silence spread, like a sickness infecting everyone around me. One Sunday, Junior wheeled me out onto the porch for fresh air. Across the street, children were playing with chalk, drawing bright suns and crooked houses. A woman waved at me, calling out, "Good to see you outside." Her words carried a weight I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to shout, "Help me!" But my throat locked, my lips stiffened. The sound that came out was a weak laugh, a wave of my trembling hand. The woman smiled satisfied and turned back to her child. Junior leaned down, his mouth brushing my ear. "See? No one suspects a thing." His voice was calm, almost gentle. That gentleness terrified me more than anger ever could. At night I prayed silently, not to be rescued, because that hope felt foolish, but for someone to at least see me, to look past the curtains, past the polite smiles, past the stories he told. But the world remained deaf, and each time I realized no one was coming, I sank deeper into myself. What does it mean when the system designed to protect you, family, doctors, neighbors, chooses blindness instead? It means you learn to live inside shadows, holding on to the smallest scraps of strength. I began to count the seconds between his footsteps, the cracks in the ceiling, the tiny flashes of memory that reminded me I had once been more than this. A mother, a sister, a woman who could laugh freely. Now I was just a whisper no one wanted to hear. And still, I told myself, survive. Always survive. Because even if no one else was listening, maybe someday, someone would. The first time he humiliated me in front of others, it felt like my skin was peeled away for everyone to see. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. A social worker had come by for a routine check. Something about updating paperwork for my disability benefits. She was young, with a notebook tucked under her arm, her hair tied back in a neat bun. She smiled warmly, pulling up a chair beside me, and asked simple questions. "How are you feeling? Do you get enough rest? Do you feel safe at home?" My heart pounded. That last question clung to the air like a lifeline. "Do you feel safe?" I wanted to scream, "No, I don't." I wanted to grab her hand, beg her not to leave me here. My mouth opened, the truth trembling on my lips. But before I could speak, Junior laughed softly from the kitchen. "Safe? She thinks the neighbors are spying on her," he said, shaking his head. "Sometimes she imagines things. It's the medication." The social worker glanced at him, then back at me. Her smile faltered, replaced by polite concern. "Is that true?" she asked gently. I shook my head desperately, but Junior stepped closer, resting his hand on my shoulder as if to steady me. "It's okay, Mom," he said. "She knows you get confused." His fingers pressed harder, a silent threat buried under the performance of care. The social worker scribbled something in her notebook, her eyes clouded with doubt. I wanted to shout, to claw through her disbelief, but the words tangled in my throat like barbed wire. She closed her notebook, thanked us, and left with a smile that felt more like pity than help. When the door shut, Junior leaned down, his voice a low hiss. "See? No one believes you. You're just an old woman with stories in her head." His laughter followed him into the kitchen, echoing against the walls like a cruel reminder. After that day, the humiliation spread. At family gatherings, rare as they were, he would tell little jokes at my expense. "Mom gets paranoid sometimes," he'd say with a chuckle while relatives nodded uncomfortably. She once thought the TV was talking to her. Lies, all of them. But no one questioned him. They only saw the devoted son caring for his fragile mother. And me? I sat in silence, trapped between shame and fury, my cheeks burning as if the whole world had turned its back. The worst part wasn't the lies he told. It was how easily people believed them. Once the seed of madness was planted, everything I said was dismissed. If I tried to hint at the truth, eyes would soften with sympathy, heads would tilt, and someone would say, "Don't upset yourself." My voice, already weak, became weightless in their ears. That night, after everyone had gone, I wheeled myself to the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed dimly, casting long shadows on the pavement. I watched the neighbor's dog chasing its tail, the children's bicycles lying on the grass, ordinary life unfolding so close yet impossibly far. I pressed my forehead against the glass and whispered, "I'm still here." But the reflection staring back at me looked hollow, like a stranger. Junior walked past, glancing at me with a smirk. "Talk to the glass all you want," he muttered. "It's the only one listening." His footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving me alone with the truth he had crafted, a truth that erased me in the eyes of everyone else. And still, beneath the shame, a stubborn ember glowed. If the world wouldn't believe me now, then one day somehow I would make them see. Hope is a cruel thing. It comes dressed as salvation, only to leave you weaker when it disappears. For the first time in years, I felt it flutter in my chest the day Junior told me he had found a job out of town. He came home one evening, tossing a crumpled flyer onto the table. "They're hiring," he said casually. "I'll be gone a few days each week. You'll be fine alone, right?" Alone. The word rang in my ears like a bell of freedom. For a moment I dared to imagine what those days could look like. Sunlight pouring through open curtains, the phone in my hand, my sister's voice on the other end. Even silence felt different when it wasn't his. A silence I could fill with my own thoughts, my own breath, not the weight of his shadow. When he left that first morning, the door clicked shut, and the sound was like wings unfolding inside me. I sat in my chair, staring at the crack of light between the curtains, and slowly pushed them open. The world outside greeted me as if it had been waiting. Children laughing, the mailman whistling, the neighbor trimming her roses. I wanted to cry from the simple sight of ordinary life. I tried the phone. My hands trembled as I pulled it from the drawer where he had hidden it. The dial tone was faint, almost foreign after so many years. I called my sister. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. My voice shook as I left a message. "It's me. Please, call back." Just speaking those words felt like breaking chains. The next 2 days were filled with tiny rebellions. I opened every curtain in the house. I sat on the porch, letting the breeze touch my face. I even tried to write again, my shaky handwriting scrawling across scraps of paper, reminders that I was still alive. The lock on the door remained broken, but for once it felt like it couldn't hurt me. But hope, as always, betrayed me. On the third night, I heard his key in the door. He stumbled in, drunker than usual, his footsteps heavy and unsteady. He looked around the room, his eyes narrowing at the open curtains, the phone on the table, the papers in my lap. His face twisted into something I'd never seen before, pure rage without disguise. "What did I tell you?" he roared, slamming the phone against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. He grabbed the papers from my lap, crumpled them, and threw them into the trash. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from fury. You think you can live without me? You think anyone cares what you have to say? I tried to speak, to explain, but my words dissolved into stammers. His hand came down on the table so hard that the wood cracked. You are nothing without me, he said, his voice low and deadly calm. Nothing. That night, he locked every drawer, every cabinet, every door. He nailed the curtains shut, hammering them into the wall until not a sliver of light could pass through. The house became a coffin, and I its unwilling occupant. The taste of freedom I had savored for 2 days turned bitter in my mouth. It would have been easier if he had never left at all, because now I knew what freedom felt like, and losing it was worse than never having it. Still, even as despair wrapped itself around me, I clung to one thought. If I could feel hope once, even for a moment, I could feel it again. And maybe, just maybe, next time I wouldn't lose it. Silence has a cost, and my body paid it daily. The more I kept quiet, the weaker I became, as if every unspoken word drained another drop of strength from me. My legs, once stubborn enough to twitch in resistance, now hung limp. My arms, frail as twigs, could barely lift a cup. Even breathing felt like work, shallow and uneven, as though my lungs had grown tired of waiting for rescue. Junior noticed, of course. He liked to comment on it. "You're wasting away," he said one night, setting down a plate with half a sandwich on it. "I guess that makes my job easier." He smirked, watching me struggle to lift the sandwich with trembling fingers. I hated myself for the way my body obeyed him, for the way I needed him even as I loathed every touch, every glance. Dependence had become my prison, and he held the keys. One afternoon, I saw it, an actual key. He dropped it on the table absent-mindedly while rummaging through a drawer. A small, rusted thing attached to a chain. I don't even know what it unlocked. Maybe the shed outside, maybe one of the locked cabinets. But the sight of it sent a jolt through me. A key meant possibility. A key meant freedom. My eyes fixed on it like a starving person staring at bread. He noticed. He picked it up slowly, dangling it in front of my face. "This?" he asked, grinning. "You think this will save you?" He tucked it into his pocket, patted it twice, and whispered, "You'll never reach it." Then he walked away, leaving me shaking with rage and despair. That little piece of metal haunted me. In my dreams, I reached for it, my fingers brushing its cold surface, only to wake up empty-handed, the air heavy with the smell of dust and sweat. At night, lying in bed, I imagined what I would do if I had that key. Not just unlock doors or drawers, but unlock my own silence. Call for help, write letters. Leave this house, even if only in spirit. But in the daylight, when reality returned, I couldn't even roll myself closer to where he kept it. The distance between us felt infinite. My health deteriorated quickly, bed sores burned on my skin. My voice grew hoarse from lack of use. Some days, I wondered if death would come quietly in my sleep. Maybe that would be mercy. But then a stubborn thought struck me. If I died here, in his house, in his control, the world would never know the truth. My life would be reduced to whispers of poor old woman while he carried on, free of guilt. That was unacceptable. I had survived too much already to let my story end as his victory. One night, I gathered what little strength I had and tried to slide from the bed onto the floor. The tiles were cold against my skin. Inch by inch, I dragged myself toward the dresser where he often dropped his things. My arms shook, my chest heaved, sweat soaked my nightgown. The distance was only a few feet, but it felt like crossing a desert. When I finally reached the dresser, my hand clawed blindly along the floor. Nothing. He had taken the key with him. I lay there for hours, the pain in my bones unbearable, until I heard his footsteps. He walked in, saw me on the floor, and laughed. Not cruelly loud, just a soft, mocking chuckle. "Look at you," he said, lifting me back onto the bed as if I were a doll. "Chasing ghosts." He tucked the blanket around me and left without another word. That night, as tears soaked my pillow, I swore to myself, one day I would touch that key. And when I did, I would not let go. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day I'd stopped expecting anything from. Junior had gone out, slamming the door behind him, muttering something about errands. I sat in my chair by the window, the curtains nailed shut but frayed at the edges, letting in the thinnest sliver of light. I leaned toward it, just to feel something real on my skin. That's when I saw her, my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, bending over her flower bed across the yard. She straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead, and glanced up. For the first time in years, our eyes met. I froze, my breath catching. Her face lit up in recognition, and she raised her hand in a wave. My own hand trembled as I lifted it, slow and awkward. The gesture felt monumental, like breaking through layers of silence. She tilted her head, frowning slightly, and I realized she could see the darkness inside my house, the way the curtains trapped me. For a moment, I thought she might walk away, like everyone else had. Instead, she set down her gardening tools and crossed the yard. Her knock on the door was soft, almost hesitant. "Hello, Mrs. Carter? It's me, Teresa. I just wanted to check on you." My heart pounded. I wanted to call out, to tell her to come in, to tell her everything. But fear clamped down on my throat. What if Junior returned? What if she told him I looked unwell? Still, her voice was like sunlight pressing against the walls. "I made extra soup. Thought you might like some." I tried to answer, but the sound barely escaped my lips. She must have heard something because her knock grew firmer. "Are you okay?" she asked. The question was simple, but it pierced me like a blade. No one had asked me that in years, not with sincerity. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Please." But the door stayed shut. I heard her footsteps retreat after a long pause. The silence that followed was unbearable, yet she hadn't turned away completely. The next day she was back, this time catching me through the crack in the curtain again. She lifted a hand to her lips, a signal for quiet, and pointed toward the side of the house. My breath hitched as she mouthed, "I'll come back." That night, Junior returned, grumbling about bills, his eyes sharper than usual. He sniffed the air, scanning the room. Did someone come by? My heart lurched, but I kept my gaze down. "No," I whispered. He studied me for a long moment before shrugging and walking away. My hands shook under the blanket, but a seed of something new had been planted. The following afternoon, when he was gone again, Teresa knocked softly at the back door. I could barely hear her over the thundering of my own pulse. "I know something's wrong," she whispered through the wood. "You don't have to tell me now. Just, if you need me, leave a sign." Her words lingered in the room long after she left. A sign. Could I do that? Could I risk it? For hours I stared at the locked drawers, the nailed curtains, the walls that had held me captive for over a decade. And then my eyes landed on the scrap of paper I had hidden beneath my mattress, one of the few I'd managed to keep from his wrath. With trembling hands, I scrawled a single word: "Help." The next morning, when Junior left, I gathered every ounce of strength I had and pushed the note through the narrow crack in the curtain. It fluttered outside, barely visible, but enough. Later that day, I saw her bending over the flowers again. She glanced up, spotted the paper, and her eyes widened. She slipped it into her pocket without hesitation, then looked back at me with a steady, unshakable gaze. She nodded once. For the first time in years, I felt seen, and in that moment I understood something. Silence had kept me alive, but her gaze reminded me I could still be saved. The morning it happened, the air felt different. Heavy, electric, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Junior had stormed out early, cursing about money. I sat in my chair, staring at the thin crack of light through the nailed curtains, when I heard it. The sound of tires crunching on gravel. Voices followed, sharp and unfamiliar. My chest tightened. Strangers. A knock rattled the door, firm and official. "Mrs. Carter, this is the police. We received a call." My heart lurched. Teresa, she had done it. For a moment, panic clawed at me. What if Junior came back and found them here? What if he punished me for this? But then another voice, softer, broke through the noise. "Ma'am, we're here to help." I tried to answer, but fear strangled my voice. The door handle shook, then the wood splintered as they forced it open. Sunlight spilled into the room for the first time in years, blinding me. I shielded my eyes, trembling as two officers stepped inside. Behind them, Teresa hovered on the porch, her face pale but determined. Our eyes met, and I saw no pity there, only resolve. One officer knelt beside me. "Are you Mrs. Carter?" I nodded weakly, tears streaming down my cheeks. His eyes scanned the room, the boarded curtains, the locked drawers, the stench of confinement. His jaw tightened. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said gently. Those words cracked something inside me. For so long I had been invisible, dismissed as paranoid, dismissed as fragile. And now, for the first time, someone believed me. But even as hope flickered, dread coiled in my stomach. Junior. He could come back any second. "Please," I whispered hoarsely. "He'll be here." The officers exchanged glances, then one of them nodded toward the porch. "Ma'am, we're taking you out of here today." They wheeled me toward the door, and I felt the sunlight burn against my skin. My body shivered under its warmth. Teresa reached out, her hand brushing mine, steady and strong. "You're safe now," she whispered. I wanted to believe her, but every creak of the floorboards, every sound of tires outside made me flinch. As they lifted me into the van, I caught sight of the old lock hanging uselessly on the doorframe. That lock had once been broken, powerless to protect me. But it wasn't the metal that had failed. It was the silence of those around me. Now, with the door wide open, I realized the truth. Freedom was never about the lock. It was about being seen, being heard. We hadn't driven far when I heard it, the screech of tires behind us. My blood ran cold. Junior's car. He had returned sooner than anyone expected. He leapt out, shouting, his face contorted with rage. "She's lying. She's sick. You can't take her." His fists pounded against the side of the van. The officers restrained him, his screams slicing through the air. I shrank back, covering my ears, but then I felt a hand on my shoulder. Teresa, standing firm, looked straight at him. "Not anymore," she said. That moment etched itself into my soul. For 12 years, no one had spoken those words for me. Not anymore. The officers pushed him back, handcuffs clinking around his wrists. His eyes burned into mine, promising vengeance, but for once I wasn't alone. As the van pulled away, I leaned against the seat, trembling. Outside, the world rushed past. Trees, houses, people walking freely. For the first time in over a decade, I was leaving the prison that had once been my home. Yet even in my relief, a shadow lingered. Freedom had come, but healing was still a distant shore. Still, As the sirens faded into the distance, I clutched the memory of Teresa's words like a key in my hand. Not anymore. The trial moved faster than I expected. Junior's arrest had been messy, loud, impossible to hide. Neighbors whispered, family avoided my eyes, and the community that had once praised him as a devoted son now murmured words like monster, shame, disgrace. For years, I had begged the universe for justice, and now it came in the form of cold metal bars and a sentence that stretched beyond a decade. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Junior would not walk free anytime soon. People congratulated me, as if his imprisonment was victory enough. But when I returned to the house, the silence pressed against me harder than ever. Without him, the rooms were empty, but they were not free. Every corner carried his shadow. The nailed curtains, the broken phone, the scars on the floor where his footsteps had worn a path, each one whispered reminders of captivity. I sat in the same chair where he had left me so many times and realized that I was still locked inside, only this time the prison was in my mind. At night, I woke from nightmares of his voice at the door, his fists pounding, his laughter echoing. My body jolted awake, drenched in sweat, even though the house was quiet. Freedom, I learned, is not just the absence of chains. It is the rebuilding of trust in the air you breathe, in the ground you walk on. And I was not there yet. One morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Community Rehabilitation Center. Inside was a single ticket, an invitation to join their physical therapy program, transportation included. The paper felt almost sacred in my hands. A ticket. A symbol of escape, not from Junior this time, but from the walls he had built inside me. I held it against my chest, my fingers trembling. Could I really leave this house? Could I step into a world that had forgotten me for 12 long years? Teresa came by that afternoon. She sat with me at the kitchen table, her hands warm around mine. "You don't have to stay here," she said softly. "This house is his cage, not yours. Take the chance." Her words cracked something open inside me. For years, I had been forced to survive in shadows. Now, for the first time, I had a choice. That night, I placed the ticket under my pillow, the way a child hides a tooth for the fairy. I dreamed of walking again, of sunlight on my face, of people calling my name without pity in their voices. But when morning came, doubt returned. What if I failed? What if my body refused to heal? What if I left only to realize I was too broken to live outside these walls? Still, when the van from the center arrived, honking gently outside, I clutched the ticket in my hand. The driver opened the door, smiling. "Ready?" he asked. My breath trembled, but I nodded. For the first time in years, I crossed the threshold, not as a prisoner being dragged, but as a woman choosing to step out. The house stood behind me, silent, its nailed curtains fluttering faintly in the wind. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The ticket in my hand was more than paper. It was a key. The rehabilitation center smelled of antiseptic and possibility. At first, the machines intimidated me. The parallel bars, the exercise mats, the wheelchairs lined up like silent witnesses. My body was fragile, my muscles thin from years of neglect, but the therapist looked at me not with pity, but with determination. "We'll start small," one of them said, "one step at a time." Those first steps were not steps at all, just the twitch of a leg, the faintest lift of my heel, but to me they felt like earthquakes. My body shook, my breath rasped, sweat rolled down my temples. And yet, the room erupted in encouragement. "Yes, that's it," their voices cheered. No one had celebrated me in so long that I cried right there, clinging to the bars, my tears mixing with sweat. For once I wasn't invisible. Weeks turned into months. My arms grew stronger, my voice steadier. I learned to hold a spoon again without trembling, to wheel myself across a room without stopping. The therapist taught me exercises, but what they really gave me was dignity. Each movement, no matter how small, was proof that Junior hadn't taken everything from me. Outside of therapy, I began to rediscover the world. Teresa visited often, bringing herbs from her garden: mint, chamomile, lavender. Their scents filled my room with memories of summers long gone. One day she suggested, "Why don't you sell these? People love natural remedies." The idea sparked something inside me. With her help, I started mixing teas, balms, and oils, experimenting with recipes I remembered from my grandmother. My hands, once tools of survival, became instruments of creation again. Soon, neighbors came to buy small jars, and word spread. For the first time in years, money entered my hands by my own effort, not as charity. I called it Grandmother's Herbs. It was more than a business. It was a declaration. I am alive. But the greatest change came not in my body or my work, but in my eyes. For years, I had avoided mirrors, unable to face the hollow reflection staring back at me. Now, I forced myself to look. Slowly, cautiously, I met my own gaze. The eyes looking back were lined with age, rimmed with sorrow, but they were also fierce, unbroken. Each day, I held that gaze a little longer until one morning I smiled at myself. It was small, fragile, but real. I carried that strength into the outside world. When I went to the market, people greeted me with warmth, some whispering, some staring. I didn't care. I looked them in the eyes, steady and unflinching. It became my silent rebellion, my proof that I had survived. For every year I had spent lowering my gaze in shame, I now raised it higher, daring the world to see me fully. Of course, healing wasn't perfect. Nightmares still came. Some days my legs refused to cooperate and I collapsed back into the chair, frustrated and angry. But I learned to see those days not as defeat, but as pauses. Progress is not a straight road. It bends, it falters, but it moves forward. One evening, as I sipped chamomile tea from my own hands, I realized I had built a life again. Not the life I once had, not the life I lost, but a new one, fragile yet mine. And when I caught my reflection in the window, eyes bright in the fading light, I whispered, "I see you." After 12 years of darkness, that was victory enough. The letter arrived on a gray morning. I recognized the handwriting instantly, uneven, pressed too hard, as if anger itself had shaped the words. Junior. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. "Mom," it began, "I'm getting out soon. I don't have anyone. I need a place to stay. I know I hurt you, but family forgives. Please, help me." For hours I sat with that letter in my lap, staring at the words until they blurred. My mind spiraled back to the years of silence, the locked doors, the bruises no one wanted to see. Part of me felt the old pull of fear, the instinct to shrink, to obey. Another part, softer, wondered if I should forgive, if holding on to anger made me his prisoner still. When the day came, he appeared at my doorstep, thinner, older, his eyes darting nervously. The boyish grin was gone, replaced by something hollow. "Mom," he said quietly, "I have nowhere else." I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I saw not the monster who had ruled my life, but a broken man standing outside the door I had rebuilt. And in that moment, I understood. Pity is not the same as forgiveness, and forgiveness is not the same as surrender. "I can't help you," I said, my voice steady. His eyes widened, shock flickering across his face. You chose what you did, I continued, and I chose to survive it. My door will never be your prison again. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders hunched, disappearing down the street like a shadow dissolving in the sun. I closed the door, locked it, not against myself this time, but for me. The lock clicked with the sound I had once feared, now transformed into something sacred: protection, choice, freedom. That night, I brewed chamomile tea and sat by the window. The curtains, no longer nailed shut, swayed gently in the breeze. I caught my reflection in the glass, eyes clear, unbroken, and whispered to myself, I am free. But freedom carries questions. Should we forgive those who destroyed us, or is survival itself the only answer? Is truth worth more than comfort even when it hurts? And now, I ask you, the one listening to my story, wherever you are, what would you choose? Would you open the door or close it forever? Tell me in the comments. I want to know not just where you are, but what you believe.